Hi everybody and welcome back to another episode of Studio Diaries. So this week was very heavy on the drawing and the painting, which was brilliant for me because that's what I really enjoy doing. So you can see me here just referencing one of my many notebooks to work out what my plan of action is for the week. So I'd sort of made some rough ideas about things I wanted to make for my Patreons, things I wanted to make for Etsy, and sort of sketched them out in my MD Cotton notebook. And you can see my son also joined in and did some lovely drawings for me, which was really sweet. And then, I'm just going back through my sort of rough notes on the Monday morning and making like a plan of action list, because I find that if I make these lists and I just work through them starting from 1, 2, 3, it sort of calms me down a little bit and it makes it seem a little less overwhelming, because I've been quite ambitious this month. So ordinarily for Patreon, up until last month I produced 3 digital sheets in total to download, but I'm actually going to be doing 4 from now on. And I'm also wanting to put more things in my Etsy shop. So I had already decided that this month I was going to be producing more original drawings. So putting a little bit more focus on the actual creation of paintings and drawings and patterns, so that I would have it felt huge actually, a large amount of raw material to work with. So I end up producing everything digitally at the end of each month, because obviously that's how you get things out to Patreons easily, is to do digital downloads. And my Etsy shop at the moment is all digital items, and that kind of came about because of the pandemic and postage being a little bit tricky. But also I quite like digital things myself, so I really enjoy buying collage sheets and like printable artwork and things myself, because you can get it instantly and you can sort of print it and use it straight away. So I guess my impatience sort of has a factor in that. So at the moment most of the stuff I produce is digital. I do make physical boxes to post out to some of my Patreons each month. The majority of my work at the beginning is digital, so everything gets put on the computer eventually. But I wanted to make as much as possible on paper. That was a very long sort of explanation of what I'm doing, but you'll see all of this video is me doing that. So starting from my list of patterns, I thought I would start off doing patterns because I suppose I'm probably more comfortable with them. So I'd made a list in my notebook of 5 pattern themes to do, and what I did is you could see me just then, I was tearing out 5 pieces of watercolour paper. It's quite thick watercolour paper. I can list the notepad and the sketchbook down below. Tearing out 5 sheets, and I've got my list of 5 pattern ideas next to me, and I sort of work on them in a circular sort of motion. So I'm working on all 5 at the same time. So I start off doing the backgrounds on each of them, and then I go into the next layer and I sort of rotate round. So I'm constantly changing them on and off that piece of wood you can see there. I put the wood down to protect my desk, although I do end up getting paint all over the desk usually, but it does sort of help protect it slightly. So you can see here next to me I have sort of like a test swatch of random colours I'm going to be using and paints, and I have my reference sketchbook. So these are all the sketchbooks I've been working in July, with the images that I thought were most successful or kind of most inspirational to me, patterns I was going to attempt to sort of emulate, although looking at it now I'm like, oh, I didn't do that one, I want to do that one. And I also have this piece of fabric here which is from a Japanese yukata, because I'm going to be sending out some of that to my Project Post tier Patreons this month, and I just kind of wanted to keep it there for reference too. So I start off with the first pattern, and I'm using the new Pebeo Masking ink for this one. I thought it might be quite nice to try that one out, drawing out sort of tanzaku patterns, which are a special decoration in the Tanabata festival here in Japan on the 7th of July. So I talked a lot more about that on my Patreon, but yeah, that's going to be the first pattern. And then for the next 4, I'm just putting down base colours really. I'm just plonking down colours, mixing them fairly randomly actually, to be honest, on that palette there, and just getting sort of like a wash down to work on top of. So I didn't film all of the painting that I did on this day because it got a little bit overwhelming, and I found I wanted to lean right over onto the page and sort of peer really closely. But what I have done where I haven't filmed footage is that I've done photos of each stage of the progress, so you can see close up sort of each stage of the progress for each of them is what I'm trying to say. I'm just showing you here that how the paint, I've sort of tried to get a sort of a good variety of colour, like different textures, just using that one blue paint across the page. So at the end of the first stage, this is what my pieces look like. So I've sort of just blobbed paint on, sort of randomly mixing paints and just blobbing them on the page. I do have a vague idea. I know that these 2 here are going to have the Morning Glory patterns on them, and so that one on the right will have like dashy patterns. This one will have a sort of trellis pattern behind them. This one is going to be a slightly more abstract one because I did a really fun abstract page in one of my sketchbooks, and I thought I'd try and repeat that one, and I actually did a bit of paint splattering on that one. So now it's on to the next sort of layer. So I'm going to go in with quite a bright pink, and I do actually end up dulling that down a bit later on. But yeah, yes, I've added white there. You can see I've sort of made it slightly less fluorescent. So it's a case of just going through each page and putting a bit of the colour on however I want to do it, basically. And then while that one's drying, I move on to the next one. So like I said, I'm doing like all 5 in rotation. And I do keep having to check my list to make sure I know which one I'm working on each time. And it's funny because as I do this, I have a favourite at the time, and I'm like, oh, this one's going to be really good. Oh, yeah. And other ones I'll be thinking, well, okay, it's not really working. And then by the end, it's all completely changed. My opinion on each piece changes like throughout the whole thing as I go, depending on how it works out, really. Because it's not thoroughly planned how I'm doing these, so and it's always a risk once you think, right, I'm going to put the yellow on here. Like here I took it all off because I put that yellow on and I was like, no, it's too strong, it's too, I suppose that page was quite vertical, and I felt that the blobs I'd done were too horizontal, and it sort of messed up the flow of the pattern. So I did actually remove bits of things as I went, but I think I got it all right. So this is sort of at the end of stage 2. I put the pink and the yellow tones on. So I've just taken a few photos so that you can sort of have a slower look at them just to see. And again, when I look at, I wish I'd scanned them as I'd gone on. I wish I'd scanned them at this stage because actually I really like them like less busy. I must remember to do that in the future. Scan at the end of each stage because they make very interesting patterns with you know, less on. So now I'm going on to the blues. So I'm adding the blue flowers, blue blobs, all sorts of things. This is why I'm putting a bit more paint spatter on. And then after the blue, I then go on to this sort of magenta purple colour. So these aren't repeat patterns. I'm just working to the edge of the page, but they wouldn't repeat if you sort of repeated them next to each other. I suppose I could at some point make repeat patterns from them, but at the moment I'm just thinking of doing them in like as a collage piece, or using. I might use the patterns for other things, but they wouldn't be actually a full repeat pattern. I don't quite know what I'm using them for yet, to be perfectly honest. I'll let you know next week. So this is where I got to at the end of my morning session. All the sheets waiting there to dry, and I'm going to go and have my lunch at this point. So I wanted to show you my vintage crock pot. I bought this. It's actually properly old. And it seems to work. It hasn't set fire. I do have it in a place where if it did randomly set fire, hopefully the house wouldn't burn down too fast. But yeah, I really love the sort of the vintage design on the front. So after lunch, this is the mess I come back up to. The mess on my desk, but it's time to crack on, and I'm moving on to green now. So I've mixed up a nice sort of fresh green colour, because I know I'm going to need it for leaves and things like that. I don't plan this colour palette. Interestingly, I am working now to a colour palette for July, for my July theme for Patreon, but it wasn't one I planned. It just sort of came about while I was doing these pages. So I've ended up with a set of colours on my paint dishes that is now a colour scheme, but it wasn't like I didn't decide it before I started, if you know what I mean. I just thought, well, I need a green now, so I mixed up a green that matched, or I felt matched all the other colours, and that then became part of my colour palette. And it's interestingly, I don't think it's a colour palette I'd normally do. I think I say that every time, to be honest. But I do try and you do different colours each month because, well, it's fun, isn't it? And that's the end of the day. So I think I got quite a lot done on Monday. I was definitely under pressure because it's my son's school is finishing for the summer in a couple of days. So I think I did quite well. Now Tuesday, I spent a little time in the morning rubbing off the masking fluid off that one pattern, and it was quite unsatisfactory actually, and I kind of wish I hadn't bothered. But they did make very nice rainbow coloured rubbings, which was quite fun. And then I started working with coloured pencils. So this one's Indigo from the Tombow Irojiten range. But this is at the point where I actually start to slightly fall out of love with this pen. There's something I wish I'd done differently, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. I think I preferred this one right at the beginning when I just put the blue down and all of the actual little rectangular Tanzaku shapes were empty. But never mind, it's done now, live and learn, and perhaps in the future I'll bear that in mind and learn from that. But yeah, I'm just sort of going around it with the pencil for now, and hoping that it sort of grows on me, basically. And then because the masking fluid didn't work so well, I do start using a white paint. I can't remember what it's called actually. It's by Copic. It's a Copic tub of paint, and it's supposed to be putting white things on top of already coloured artwork. So it was really good, really opaque. So I just added those on with a paintbrush. But you can see here where I'm sort of very indecisive at this point because I don't really like the light lines, and I'm wondering whether to bother doing the outlines on the rest of it. But in the end, I just go for it, and I do continue with the indigo. And then at this point, switched to taking photos of everything, so you can see the progress in the photos I was taking. So it's all just working onto it with pencil crayons or coloured pencils, just adding details bit by bit by bit. And this is what I end up with at the end of Tuesday. And looking back at the footage, probably wish I'd stopped a little earlier with a lot of them. Wish I'd, maybe done less, made them a bit less busy. But I don't know, I'm really pleased with this one. I really like that sort of foresty landscape sort of look. I really like that one. This one is probably my least favourite, and looking back at the footage I probably should have sort of done less to it. Something about the flowers don't look quite right to me. Not quite sure, but perhaps I can use it for something. This one I'm quite pleased with. I do like the way the little yellow flowers are in between the purple morning glories. I think they look quite sweet. And I do like the colour balance on this one. And this one I'm still not quite so sure, not really sure. It doesn't seem to fit with the others quite so well. It's very bright, but we'll see. I might go do something with it. I think perhaps if I chop it up small, like digitally use it in smaller pieces, it might be quite sweet really. Oh, and I finished the day just by having a go with my little ink dots. So I did put this on Instagram at one point, that I was faffing around with ink in a dropper. So I did a huge piece because I'm thinking I'm going to use that for something this month, Patreon. I'm not quite sure what, but perhaps a digital texture or something. So yeah, I just did that at the end of the day. It was very relaxing just to finish off the day. So Wednesday was the first day where I attempt to work from home whilst my son is on holiday. So from now on the footage probably gets a little bit less, well, I guess a little bit less basically. He's very happy to sit and play on his iPad while I do bits and bobs, but it does feel a little bit awkward. It feels a little bit like I'm ignoring him sort of thing, but I try and crack on. And then we'll go and we sort of do something in between my little spurts of work. So I was doing some sort of texture patterns on Wednesday, making some sheets up with different textures on. So I had the ink drop sheet from the previous day, and I'm doing this one here with lots of lines and dashes, because once I put that up into my computer, I can isolate each line and I can use them to make digital patterns, and it may not be for this month, it may be for future projects, but I quite like to kind of have a collection of digital textures and patterns on my computer ready, so that if I need something to add into something I'm working on, I don't have to then redraw it. So if I'm working on a piece, I'm like, oh, I could just do with a dashed line here. I don't have to get my pens out and do it and then scan it in. I've got it all ready on my computer. So all I'm doing really at this point is making up a load of textures to add to my sort of little library. And they do go with the theme. So this dashes and lines can be like bamboo patterns if I'm going to do something. Because my theme for the month is going to be the summer festival of Tanabata. So I don't think I've mentioned it fully in any of my studio diaries. I have explained it on Patreon to my top 2 tiers, but Tanabata is a festival on the 7th of July, and you hang paper decorations on bamboo. So a lot of the pictures here are to do with that sort of festival, or like inspired by that festival, and some books I was looking through. So there'll be echoes of bamboo in my drawings, and the paper decorations are sort of like mixed into my drawings. And I then go on later in the week to do some very specific sort of summer themed Tanabata drawings. So you'll be seeing those in a bit. But yeah, so that's kind of the theme I'm working to for July for Patreon. So Thursday, my son had some friends round, so while they were all splashing around in the paddling pool in the garden, I sat at the table nearby and I did some pencil sketches. So on the left are some sort of thumbnail sketches, like ideas for drawings, and on the right are the final ones, the final compositions. And this is something I've been not putting off exactly, but in my head I've been feeling quite nervous about it because I haven't done this much for Patreon. I haven't done that many like proper illustrations, I suppose you could say. I've done a lot of patterns and I've done a lot of doodles, I would call them, but I've not sat down and attempted like a proper illustration, like a pencil sketch, and then adding the layers of paint and all that kind of thing. So I'm feeling quite nervous about it, but I'm also really enjoying it, and I hope that by the end of next week it will all have worked out and I'll be able to use them for something and my patrons will like them, and I will of course show them in my studio diaries next week. But yeah, most of the work for the rest of the week is just scanning in my artwork ready to play with and painting these illustrations. So Friday morning I scanned in all of the work I've done so far and I put it all into one big file on my computer, so that when I finished the painting of the actual illustrations, I'm kind of good to go, and I'm good to sit down at my computer, work through all of the digital files and make up the digital sheets for Patreon and hopefully get something on Etsy this month. And then the other fun bit at the end of that is I'm going to print things off myself and I'm going to play with things myself and actually physically make the items for me and for my top tier on Patreon. So I feel like I made really good progress this week, and I'm really proud of myself for attempting these illustrations here, because I was really nervous about doing them and definitely procrastinating a little bit. I did leave them right till the end, but I really hope they work out as nicely as in my head, and I look forward to sharing them with you next week. So I think I got quite a lot done this week, and I'm really, glad I managed to get it all done. And I'm really looking forward to finishing these paintings and getting on to make the digital sheets. So thank you very much for watching. If you've made it to the end, I really appreciate it. I know this video is very heavy on the footage of just me painting, but I hope some of you really enjoyed it and you managed to last to the end. And thank you, extra big thank you to my Patreons as usual for supporting me, and I really hope you're looking forward to your July rewards. So I'll see you all next week with another studio diary, and I hope you're all well. Thanks for being here. See you soon. Bye.